Hello, everyone. Hi, everybody. I can see we have some people in the audience already, so welcome. Um, my name is Nicole. I'm part of the team here at GlossGenius, and I'm super excited to welcome you all to a really awesome webinar. I want to remind everybody, if this is your first webinar with GlossGenius, maybe you've been with us before, we do have a little chat function, so feel free to take advantage of that, share your thoughts, reactions, questions. Feel free to drop a hello, but super excited to kind of get into it. So what we are diving on tonight, I think, is a really, really fascinating topic. We are getting into the financial strategy of running an aesthetic business. The part that we find that many owners might avoid, or maybe don't know how to approach, or think they'll figure out later as they go. My guest tonight actually built her entire career around making these concepts less intimidating and more actionable for med spa and aesthetic business owners. So we have a lot to cover. And quick housekeeping before Whitney's formal introduction. Another quick note, this is being recorded. So if for whatever reason you need to drop, you can't stay the whole time, don't stress. We'll send you the replay. And again, feel free to use the chat. And we will have some dedicated time for Q&A too. But with that, let's introduce our guest. So Whitney Morrison is the founder of Holistic Money, which is a fractional CFO firm that works exclusively with aesthetic, wellness, and med spa business owners. Whitney already said this, but I'm so pumped you're here, and I can't wait to dive on this topic.
Yes, I'm so excited to be here.
Awesome. And, maybe let's start with a little bit of context for the room. So I'm curious, how did you end up working specifically in this space?
Yeah, it really happened organically. I'm going to go back a little bit first because I think my story around money is actually a big reason why I landed where I am today. So, I had my family actually. I had a really, really stressful financial life growing up. My dad was a compulsive gambler, and my mom was always on the other side of watching him make terrible financial decisions. And it was really stressful for me as a kid. And so I knew from a very young age, I was like, I know I want to work in money. I know I want to figure this money thing out. I don't want this to be me. So that was kind of the genesis of me getting into finance in general. And then from there, I started working with female business owners, and I fell into the med spa space because I started to notice a lot of the female business owners and business owners as well that I was running into had very similar issues, and were experiencing a lot of financial stress with money. So in the med spa industry, there's high top line revenue. So these owners are making great revenue, but when it comes down to really looking at profit and cash flow, I started noticing again and again that a lot of these businesses were struggling with that. And so I really made it my goal to work in this industry because I love beauty. I love helping women and in beauty. And I just think that there are so many levers within the med spa industry that you can pull to actually get your finances in a better place.
I love that. We're going to get really deep on a lot of those levers through the program. So I'm super excited to get into your expertise. And I'm curious, maybe as we're kind of just starting to scratch the surface of what's common here, Whitney, when you first start working with a new client, are there some patterns that you see consistently show up?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the first things I see, especially in the med spa industry, because they're selling services that are high ticket services, is I see high top line revenue. But then when we actually sit down to look at the numbers, we start to look at profitability, cash flow, what the owner is actually paying themselves. I just see that there is a pretty big disconnect there. I have a med spa client currently who's doing a little over 2 million in revenue. And and she's having difficulty making her compensation payroll there. I was like, what is that word? Payroll for her team. So I've just noticed again and again that this is a recurring pattern in med spas, and it's not necessarily an industry or a visibility problem. It's a financial strategy problem. I really think that there is precise financial strategy that you can implement to get around and not fall victim to some of these patterns that I see.
Yeah, I love that. No, and I think this is what we're hearing. There's a tension between having this like tremendous revenue, but the profit somehow is getting lost in the weeds there. And so, uncovering that and the strategies around it is what we're gonna like really get into today. So, okay, let's really quickly before we start to jump into our content. I love to do this. Those of you guys who've been to a GlossGenius webinar before know this. I know we already have some people saying hi in the chat. If you're open to it, drop your name, where you're joining from, and what you do. I'm so curious to see who all is with us. Okay, we have some typers. I have a feeling we have some good quorum across the country today. Hi, Mimi. Amazing. Give you guys a second. And I always like to do this too because these events are, we're learning a lot. We're also getting a little bit of a taste of community here. So hopefully maybe we can make some connections in the chat. Maybe some people you'll follow afterwards and get to know in the process of our program tonight. Hi, Precious from Little Rock. Oh my gosh, amazing. Liz from El Paso. We've got Beth from Utah. Thanks, guys, for joining us. And I see we have a nurse injector in the chat. We have an esthetician. We have an aesthetic injector, cosmetologist. I think there's going to be a lot of really great information for everybody in here. Sienna Nail Tech from Boise. Hello, Sienna. Hey, thanks, guys. We'll continue to drop some greetings in the chat and make those connections. And yeah, as I mentioned before, feel free to drop any questions or comments as we go too. But with that, let's get into strategy number 1. So we are covering 5 strategies tonight. The first one is one that kind of pops to mind first in many cases, but this one is pricing. And so, Whitney, when we were first kind of speaking, getting to know each other, you said something that really stuck with me, which is that pricing is at the very top of the funnel. So tell us what you mean by that and how you kind of view pricing as a lever for these businesses.
Sure. And when I say pricing is at the top of the funnel, I literally mean that it is the start of the money flowing into your business. And so when your pricing is too low, or trying to match the competitor next door and not necessarily taking into account your specific financial situation, what can happen is that every financial obligation after that can be negatively impacted. It doesn't matter if you have a great comp plan. It doesn't matter if you have really great vendor relationships to where you can get like more competitive pricing on your products or your medical supplies. If your pricing is off, it's going to throw off every other part of your business. And your numbers aren't going to look the way that you want and need them to look for you to pay yourself and for you to generate the amount of profit that you want to generate. And a pattern that I see is a lot of owners making pricing decisions based off of the wrong things instead of what I consider to be like the financials.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think there's this piece around pricing based on what you see around you. And then this, you mentioned to me, can kind of sometimes create, especially with things like Botox and other injectables, can kind of create a race to the bottom. So share with me a little bit specifically about what you're seeing in this market and some of the pitfalls that people are falling into.
Well, I think number one, there's like our patient behavior, like what patients think of when they think of going to a med spa. And Botox and neuromodulators in general is one of the first things. And I think it's one of the more popular like medical aesthetic treatments that patients go in to get treated for. And so a lot of medical practices are starting to bring it into their business. So it's no longer just med spas. It's also dermatology. It's also plastic surgeons. They're starting to do it. So really, Botox is becoming, and neuromodulators in general, is becoming more of a commodity. It is the entry point that a lot of patients will walk into for their facial treatments. And so a lot of people, what they're doing, a lot of owners are looking around to see how everyone is pricing. But if you're constantly trying to gain your patient base by pricing like a little lower than the person next door, or even just matching the person next door, number one, you can never make decisions about your business's financials based off of what somebody else is presenting, like the front of their business, because you never know what the back of their business looks like. You don't know if they have investors, you don't know if they have a ton of debt, you don't know if they have a lead conversion strategy where they say, okay, we are going to do like bring in this lower profit service initially, but we have a really great conversion strategy to make more money. Like,
Yeah.
you don't know what's happening in the back of their business. So you cannot make decisions, pricing decisions on what you're going to do for your business based off of someone else. You really have to base it off of the data in your business.
Yep. Yep. I think that's such a brilliant point. I think, like, I'm curious, outside of the data in your own business, are there other things that folks should be thinking about when they're considering pricing? I think data obviously a critical component, but anything else that's important as we're determining pricing for something like that?
Yeah, I think there are. So when I say data, what I
Yeah,
really mean is what it costs for you to deliver your services.
sure.
So when you're looking at that, when I look at cost of delivery, and I know we're going to go over this more in depth later in the webinar, but your cost of delivery, you don't want that to be any more than 50% of your
Yeah,
revenue. So that means you need to understand, okay, what does it cost? What are my products costing me? My consumables, my medical supplies, my filler, my injectable, whatever. And then also what am I paying my clinicians?
sure.
And that can really help you start to determine how to price your services. One thing I will say that a lot of owners tend to forget about in the med spa industry is equipment cost. And
Mhm.
Nicole, you and I didn't touch on this that much, but I want to bring this up now because
Absolutely.
um, the cost of buying lasers are multi six-figure investments. They're hundreds of thousands of dollars. And a lot of owners forget to take into account the equipment cost per treatment when they're looking at their pricing strategy. So it's really important that you are taking into account the holistic cost for your business, including the debt payments that you're making towards your equipment loans
Right.
when you're considering your pricing strategy.
Yeah, super important points to make there.
Oh,
Um,
I actually do have one more thing to say about
yes,
this,
absolutely.
because if you are going to have what's called a loss leader is a service that you market to your patient base that you are not going to make that much money on. And
Mhm.
you do this intentionally to get people in the door. But if you're going to do that, if you know, for example, that your Botox, for example, is not as profitable as like your lasers, for example, get them in the door, and you have to train your team well enough to be able to move someone from, hey, I'm coming in for just Botox, to educating them on their skincare, educating them on how to improve the quality of their skin, and to get them into other services. Um, because if you don't have that as a training plan and a key strategy in your business, you're just going to have a loss leader that people come in, get the service, leave, and you're not making money. But you can do it as long as you have a plan on how to get them into other services in your business.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's such an excellent point. And I'm curious for the audience here, obviously we're talking a little bit about where some of our starting point might be, right? Where we've potentially stacked up pricing in a way that isn't perfect for our business. I'm curious for the audience, when was the last time you guys raised your prices? I wonder if anybody wants to be brave and share any thoughts about that. Maybe it was recent, maybe it was more than a year ago. Last week, Aaron's on it. That's amazing. Um, 1 year, Lauren. I think there's a lot of different sort of levels of comfort with this. Alicia, I struggle with this. Yeah. Mary, I haven't raised them. It's way past due. Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a real challenge that we see. So, Whitney, what do you say to owners who know that it might be time to raise their prices, but are maybe a little bit afraid of losing clients or other consequences that could come from something like this?
I think that you have to be willing to lose clients, because the clients that are coming to you for a discount are not the clients that, or trying to get their services for cheaper, are not the clients that are going to be your ideal long-term clients. You want clients who are willing to invest in themselves and their skin and their holistic treatments. And so I think it's good. I think it's a part of being an entrepreneur, is
Yeah.
the people that get you to where you are in your business today are not necessarily going to be the same people that are going to get you to that next level. And you have to be willing to shed the patients that aren't willing to invest and want the cheap services in order to get to your patients who will.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. There's a difference between, potentially the clients that were price shopping and just kind of looking for that best deal versus the ones that are in it for the long haul and have a lot of belief in you and your business. So, I think that's an amazing point. And I remember when we were first chatting, this was something that I thought was such a brilliant strategy when it comes to pricing. So I wanted to highlight this. You mentioned this idea of pricing per area versus pricing per unit, specifically for injectables. So I'm curious what that sort of means. And, I think it could be kind of an interesting mindset shift for some people in the room strategically. So curious if you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah, I've started to see this happen more and more in the industry, where instead of just pricing per unit, like you had mentioned, um, pricing pricing by the outcome. So pricing to say, okay, I'm going to treat your forehead, or I'm going to treat your frown lines, or and whatever it is, treating per area versus treating per unit. And this can be a tricky pricing strategy for owners if they're not really in touch with, what their average units are that they're injecting per patient. But you
Yeah.
want to, it can be a good way to, number one, encourage your patients to stop thinking about me getting 10 or 50 units, and think more about, I'm coming here to get the results that I want to see for myself. And I think there can be a little extra margin there. And you can also kind of balance like those people that aren't getting as many units with people that are. So I think packaging, which I know we're going to talk about later as well, is also another lever that you can pull on how to get more profitability in your menu and your services.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I'm seeing Christy left a really awesome comment. We did that recently for lip flip specifically. We were charging $50 and changed to 75 for special event promos. Never thought about doing it for other areas. So yeah, Christy, maybe this is your sign to think about, are there any other sort of treatments, you can market them more that way than, that price per unit. I think that's such an excellent example of where there's a little bit of extra to be gained. And yeah, Mary, we're delivering long-lasting results, and pricing must reflect that. I think that's so true. And what I thought about when we initially talked about this was, you guys are the experts, right? And the patients are coming to you with the belief that you're going to deliver these transformative results. And I think maybe sometimes we lose sight of that expertise and how we can market into that versus into these very kind of transactional units. So really great food for thought there. Before we transition to strategy number 2, I wanted to also just mention, in terms of ways that your tech systems can help support better pricing strategy. GlossGenius is a really great option here when you think about the way that you can build a service menu that's marketable and visible online. So with GlossGenius, our booking sites really help you, reflect those structures and make them stick. So if you are making pricing transitions, packaging transitions, it's a really clear way to communicate this with your clientele, and then make it easy for them to purchase said services online. And then that way, all of these systems are set up exactly how you want. Every appointment, every checkout, every report reflects this model for like complete consistency across you, your team, and your clients. So just something to consider as well. But I would also recommend, if you guys were inspired by any of this good pricing strategy talk, feel free to take a screenshot of this slide. Some really good, just high level pointers for you in there. But with that, let's transition to our second strategy, which is, I think, a real favorite here at GlossGenius as well, which is about getting honest with all of your numbers, super honest, and not just thinking about that number that hits your bank account. Really knowing your numbers beyond just revenue. And so with that, I'm curious, Whitney, what would you say are kind of the top level call outs here, the things that people maybe aren't considering, might be missing a little bit when it comes to this strategy?
Yes. So everyone likes to track revenue, top line revenue. It's the most fun number to track. But what we forget to track is, what we forget is that revenue is not profit, and profit is not cash in your bank accounts. So I've seen businesses that have like top line multi-million, 2, 3, 4 million. Their net profit will be 15%. And then from that 15%, which is, and just to not use financial terms, because I know a lot of you studied medical aesthetics and not necessarily finance. So when I say net profit, I mean that's the amount of money left over after you've paid all of your expenses in the business. And then from your net profit, you have to pay other things. So you have to pay your taxes, you get profit distributions for yourself. And then you also have to pay off your debt. Your debt payments actually come from your net profit. So that's why we can see that even if you can have high revenue, decent profit, you might have cash flow issues if you're not truly looking at the full picture of where money is going and what it needs to be spent on.
Yeah. And I wonder, and obviously this might be something that's hitting home with some people in the audience tonight, if someone's in that situation where profit is looking okay on paper, but cash isn't there, potentially because of some of these issues they're not yet accounting for, where do you start when it comes to turning things around and making a difference immediately?
This is why I love this business, because there really are so many things that you can do. But I think one of the most important things to start with is, number one, to know your debt obligations. Like literally pull up every device, every loan, every line of credit, and actually add up how much you have to pay every single month towards those things. A lot of owners have no idea how much that actually is. And so I think that's really important to do that. And then the next thing you want to look at is your other big expenses in the business are your aesthetic treatment products. So that is everything that you're purchasing to deliver your service, and then your labor.
Yeah.
What percentage of your revenue is going to labor?
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah, really helpful first places to look there. And let's talk a little bit more about metrics. And so obviously we've got into some of these like top line issues that we often see. I'd love to know, what are some of the KPIs that every med spa owner should be tracking that most may not be?
Yeah. So as a fractional CFO, what we like to track is we like to track financial metrics and operational metrics. So the financial KPIs that we really like to track are, number one, your total revenue. We like to look at your profit margin, which is, like I said, how much revenue is left over after you've paid your expenses. And then we like to look at your cash flow. So, how much money is left in your business after you've paid all of your debt, taken your profit distribution. We also like to look at, from a financial side, we like to look at your revenue streams. What are the top services that are generating your revenue for you? We like to look at your labor costs. We try to keep your labor costs total with your direct and indirect labor. Direct meaning the clinicians that are working directly with your patients, indirect meaning your admin labor, your medical assistants. We like to keep that total labor at 30% of your revenue, aesthetic treatment product around 30 as well. And I know we actually have a slide that we're going to really dive into that. So you tell me, Nicole, how deep you want me to go into that here.
That's a great place to start.
Okay.
And I know one thing that was really interesting when we were kind of chatting about this topic was this idea of average ticket per hour. And then also on that ticketing side, member versus non-member spend. So I wonder if you could tell the audience a little bit about those two kind of interesting ones.
Okay. Thanks for reminding me, because I talked about all the financial KPIs, but I didn't talk about all the operational KPIs. So KPIs are essentially just key performance indicators. Just not to get too lingo-y, but all of your financial markers that we're tracking are driven by your operational metrics, your operational KPIs. So how your team is performing is what's going to generate your net profit, or your top line revenue. How much you're spending on labor is what's going to generate your labor costs. So we like to look at specific metrics that you can bring to your team to really coach them and train them. So the things that we like to look at there is average ticket, like how per hour. So when your clinician is working, how much revenue are they generating? And in that hour. And I would say like I've worked with med spas that their median is about 400 to 500 an hour. And the top med spas are more like $1,000 an hour per injector. And then member spend versus non-member spend. I love this because memberships are becoming pretty popular within the med spa. So we really like to look at how is your membership actually creating loyalty through your patient base. So are patients coming back? Are they spending more money than non-members? What is the frequency of their visits? And all of that kind of helps you determine, okay, is my membership doing well? Should I sell more? Should I not?
Yeah, such a great point. And I know, it's very possible that memberships can drive a lot of incrementality in terms of additional spend, additional appointments, when they're structured correctly. So, yeah, and I'll say too, I think one of the things that becomes really critical when you dive deep or want to dive deep on some of these metrics is making sure you have a system built that can actually deliver those kinds of insights to you. We are really proud at GlossGenius to have built the kind of analytics and reporting that really gets you there. Revenue by service, average ticket, provider performance, member versus non-member spend. These are things that you can access through the platform. So for those of you guys that are already with us at GlossGenius, I think worth a look. And I would say too, really the main engine behind this is the growth analyst that we have at GlossGenius. So if you've not yet played around with Growth Analyst, maybe you're not on the platform yet, I think really, really cool tool. You can uncover critical data and critical gaps with just a few simple prompts in plain English to the analysts. Basically like a ChatGPT for your business data that's built into your platform. Really gets to know you, your numbers, your team, everything that's going on under the hood. And then what I love about it is that it actually returns next steps and insights, things that you can take and transform into action, which I think that's something that we're also hungry for. Great, you've shown me information. What do I do about it? And I think that's what really sets it apart. So without having to comb through a bunch of spreadsheets or being stressed about going deep, you're able to do it reliably with very little additional admin work, which is amazing. And then the last thing I'll say, obviously accurate data that's current is what makes these kinds of, changes that when you speaking on possible to action quickly. So last, other quick thing that I think is pretty cool too, we also are able to flag problems proactively. So when you open your GlossGenius dash, if there's something that's really out of whack, the growth analyst will actually present that to you without you even having to ask. So love that as well. So again, words of the wise for those of you guys who haven't played around with it yet, might be worth a look. That being said, I want to ask a little bit of a question to everybody here. How many of you guys feel like you have a clear, confident view of your profitability in any given month at any given time? I'm curious if anybody here feels strongly that they're like deep on this, they know what's going on. Got some typers, some brave typers. Not at all, Mary. We got to change that. We're going to get there. Hopefully this is putting a little fire under you to get there. Elizabeth, okay, same. Yep. Precious is confident. We love that. Well, all that to say, there are tools that are out there for you to help you get there and understand that profitability. And Whitney, I'm curious if you have any reactions to some of what the chat has shared here.
I think it's really common. I think that, numbers, if you're not, you all are not necessarily, you didn't go to school to analyze your numbers or think through your numbers. So it makes a lot of sense. I see this a lot in service-based businesses where you're really wonderful at being an injector, but not necessarily being a CFO or being like, using the really amazing tool that you all have through GlossGenius. But I will tell you this, like, if you're not making data-backed decisions, like it's so important to not make decisions off of how you feel, because your emotional compass isn't always wired or like metered for profitability. But your true financial data is what, like, every time you have an inclination or a hunch, you want to go searching for the data that supports the story that you have. If you see that the data supports the story, use the data to make the decision. But like, I just can't stress enough how the best CEOs in the world traditionally have a finance background. And it's because financials and data to drive your decision making for in your business is the most neutral way and successful way to make decisions. So good data is very, very important.
Yeah, that's such an excellent point. We want you guys to all be as effective as you can be as CEOs, in addition to everything else you do, which, by the way, doesn't go unnoticed. It is a heavy, heavy load of work on all of your shoulders. So hopefully we're providing some intel tonight that's going to help get you there. And with that, I want to head to strategy number 3. I think this is a really interesting one. That's also really easy to action, which is around menu strategy. And I think there's a lot of people who maybe underestimate this because owners might think of the menu as just like what services we offer and something that you kind of put together one time and then, maybe it ends there. But Whitney, you kind of frame it as like a financial architecture decision. So talk us through, some of the things that you think people should be, considering when it comes to the menu.
Sure. So the way I think about a service menu is it truly is one of the most powerful financial tools that you have. And most owners aren't being strategic when they're actually building their service menu. Like they will just add services without really thinking about, okay, how could I create something more holistic? How could I create something that creates better patient outcomes? How could I create basically packaging that that can drive more profitability and help my patients? And a lot of people are just pricing off of like, okay, here's the individual services that, or building their service menu off of, here's everything that I offer. And you, patient, who is completely uneducated about medical aesthetics and has no idea of all the different things that you can do to get to the outcome that you want, you get to decide which services that you want. When really, I think the way that the industry is moving is it's moving away from that, and it's moving more towards, here's the treatment plan for you.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think something I've noticed is a lot of this discussion about treatment plans and packages and how they can influence really great outcomes for owners. And Whitney, I know you mentioned this story to me about laser packages that I thought was such a great example. So I wonder if you could share a little bit with the audience about that one.
Sure. So, one of my top performing med spa that I have, I mean, they are, I use them as a point of reference often when I'm talking about key strategies for med spas because they really have nailed so many aspects of their business. And on the top line, their service menu is very interesting. It's different than most other med spas that I work with. And number one, they do per area pricing, so they don't do the per unit. We already talked about that. And number two, with any of their laser treatments, they don't actually sell single sessions. So they only sell packages for lasers because oftentimes when you go in and you get a laser treatment, the prescription is to get at least a minimum of 3 treatments. And so while most other med spas are saying, yeah, you can, just book a single IPL session or Airlays, they're saying no, like we deliver treatment and treatment plans, and you can only buy a minimum of 3 laser sessions to get the desired outcomes. And because of that, number one, their patients, like, people go to that med spa because of the skin that their patients have. Like, their patients have gorgeous skin. We all know that, like, filler and Botox can only get you so far, but the quality of your skin is really driven from like laser microneedling. And so they have built a practice that people look at their patient's skin and they're like, wow. But they have done that by the way that they have positioned their menu and the way that they've intentionally directed their patients. And guess what? They also have amazing profitability. So it's like win, 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 win.
Right. When all those things work together, it's kind of a perfect like circle that sort of keeps itself moving, right? Where, you've got that menu structure working together to create outsized results, but also great retention, great profitability. I love seeing that all in like one beautiful example. It's just amazing.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. I'm curious, like, obviously that might feel like a huge departure for some people in the audience in terms of strategy. So what does it take to kind of make this change? Like, what does it take to adjust your menu to really create the kind of experience that this particular med spa is able to do?
Well, it takes a commitment to greater patient outcomes. It takes a mindset and a belief in yourself that you can charge these rates, that you can, that your patients are willing to come in and invest that kind of money with you. And
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of money mindset work that has to be done in this industry because I think especially in the medical field, ethics are very important, and like not over treating someone or selling someone additional things because they don't need it. And so when you move from like a clinical, like pharmaceutical setting, like or a hospital setting into a medical aesthetic setting, a lot of these, most all medical aesthetic treatments are elective, and so it's a lot more about education. It's a lot more about committing to better patient outcomes and like working on your ability to encourage patients to invest more to get the actual results that they want.
I love that. I think it's such a brilliant point. And I wonder too, when it comes to supporting like these types of, sales, these types of treatments, how does systems play a role? Like whether it's staff training or tech, like what are the kind of critical pieces that come in from a system standpoint that support this kind of new menu strategy?
Well, I think making sure to optimize your menu, your service menu, and making sure that everyone on your team um, is on the same page and understands the patient first mindset that you're using to build this.
Yeah.
Yeah, does that answer your question?
It does. No, I think it's
Yeah.
critical. Like
Yeah.
I think it's an excellent point around just staff training in general, making sure everybody feels on the same page and also set up to sell these new packages and these new systems, the proper way. So, no, definitely, I think it's a really interesting way to reorient menus. I'll point out here when it comes to the systems that support this, GlossGenius is really helpful as well. You are able to sell memberships and packages with GlossGenius, whether it's on site, at your brick and mortar, but then also online 24/7, which is really effective as well. With really customizable offers, terms, inclusions, really easy ways to make sure that your clients are being billed on schedule and that you're getting paid for any memberships. And then you're also able to really easily monitor redemptions and automate communications around these memberships and packages. And really kind of an interesting nuance with GlossGenius is the ability to sell more of these with buy now, pay later. So for clients who might be interested in a much larger package, but maybe are used to a different style of treatment or more one-off treatments, this could be an interesting way to sell them into packages and memberships, while also accommodating them and their needs. So just a really interesting tool that's there for you guys. And it's really, again, that infrastructure where you can run this menu strategy, packages, treatment plans, recurring revenue, all you need to really be successful when it comes to this new way of thinking about the menu. Amazing. And I see, Laura, I would love a webinar membership sales through GlossGenius. Thank you for sharing that. That's great feedback. Hopefully we can deliver on that at some point, but feel free to drop any other questions and thoughts about that in the chat too, because if there's specific ones, we'd love to talk about them. But all right, so we are getting sort of to the back half of the event. So I'm going to kind of get us to strategy number 4 here, which is around comp plans. So I know this is a topic that can feel a little bit uncomfortable. It's definitely a challenging one, but Whitney, I know that this is one of the most common financial problems that you see. So would love to kind of get your take at a high level on what to consider when it comes to comp plans.
Yeah, so comp plans can be a little tricky. Number one, because as an owner, you want to make sure that you are paying your team fairly and you want them to want to show up to work and do a good job. And it's pretty common for like RNs or anyone coming from like the hospital setting or clinic setting to be used to a salary. And so when you're coming into Medspa, it's a different framework. And so I think when it comes to comp plans, at least when it relates to your direct labor, your clinicians working directly with your patients, what you really want to look at is you kind of want to work backwards. You want to start with, okay, how much revenue do I really want this person to generate in this role when they are ramped up and when they are fully utilized? And the goal there is to have them earn about 6x what it is that they're actually being compensated. And this can help you. So it's really like it's 15% of the revenue that they're generating.
Yeah, I think that's such a great benchmark just to keep in your back pocket, guys, as when it comes to thinking about, your existing providers and maybe even growing your providers and how many folks are working with you. And I'm curious, Whitney, like, what's the risk when comp plans drift away from benchmarks like this and owners maybe don't catch it fast enough?
Well, your number one, like resentment will start to build as an owner. Like what I have seen happen is when owners come in and they create a comp plan that is more generous to the employee than it is like advantageous financially to the business. What slowly starts to happen is number one, the owner will become extra critical of the employee, because ultimately when you're looking at your financials, when you're looking at your bank account balances, when you're seeing how much you're paying your clinician and your admin team, if you're not seeing the results for the number that you're paying them, then it will happen. So you have to you have to be smart about your comp plans early, and you have to design something that it aligns the priorities of the business and the employee together. And so that is where I really think starting to like think about, okay, can I do like a lower base, like a lower hourly base for them with some kind of like incentive on top of that, depending upon what they sell? And then can I bonus them if they hit the revenue targets that I want them to hit and that they need to hit in order to quote unquote justify their comp that I'm paying them? And I think when you can kind of merge all of the values of the business, your needs, their needs, you can create a comp plan that works well for everyone.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. And I'm curious, you know, it's, as you mentioned, obviously in an ideal world, you would get this stuff right from the beginning, but we don't always know what we're walking into. So, if an owner is thinking their comp structure might need a rethink, how would you recommend people, have that conversation with their team without it feeling, like a huge letdown?
Well, I think you can start to say like, hey, we're considering a new comp plan redesign, and we want to create something that actually is going to allow you to make more money when the business makes more money. So we're going to create something that's going to give you more upside and something that's going to financially protect the business in the event that that performance isn't as planned. And I think it's really like framing it like we're in this together. And also, like, as an owner, your role with your team is to support them in their growth. So I always like encourage owners to talk in terms of we, like, what can we do to help you hit your goal, and like what are the things we can work on. um and I think that's really a useful way to kind of bring in a new comp plan and position it. Like, you have to build something that gives them more upside than what they currently are, but also protects the business in the season if it's not a good fit.
Yeah, 100%. Love those tips. And I think great advice for a lot of different kinds of management conversations for sure, too.
Yeah.
But I will also say, something that can help you evaluate your decisions and understand if you're hitting that kind of 6X benchmark or a similar one is really crisp provider level reporting and management tools. So, I will share that with GlossGenius. We see that owners cut more than 40 hours of monthly admin in part because it is so easy to access these critical metrics that they need to go deep on in order to make these sorts of decisions and judgments. So with our platform, you're able to break down revenue by provider automatically, see how much each member of your team is generating per appointment, per hour, over time, in one platform that sits alongside everything else you need. So you can go into that conversation with data instead of a gut feeling, to get back to that sort of thought we shared earlier around making sure that your decisions are data driven. This gives you the opportunity to do that really smoothly. And in a way that's going to land in a really powerful way for everyone. So another little piece of advice about how the platform can support you there.
Sure. And I want to, is it okay if I say one thing? I see a comment that says that was a hard situation. Comp plan redesign, employees get fickle or scared off because they want a steady paycheck. I just want to address this because what I have seen, especially in this industry, is your A players, the people that you want on your team, are entrepreneurial and are excited by the idea of being able to get paid based off of their performance. If you do start to notice someone that is just wanting a steady paycheck and is just wanting security, then working in medical aesthetics may not be the best hire for your business. I've seen this in my business, I've seen this in my clients' businesses, but the mentality of the people that you hire is critical to your financial success and honestly, and their financial success.
That's such a great point. No, thank you for sharing that. I think that makes a ton of sense. Um, Amazing. Well, let's move on to our very final strategy. And hopefully we'll reserve a teeny bit of time for some questions from you guys. But we've covered pricing, we've covered knowing your real numbers, menu strategy, comp plans, and And this is kind of what ties it all together. We were alluding to this a little bit in the beginning. It's a framework that Whitney uses with her clients to try to figure out where they actually stand. So with that, Whitney, would love for you to share us a little bit about this and what it means to everybody here.
Sure. Okay. So what you're looking at is a breakdown of financial health indicators for a med spa. And as a fractional CFO, what we do is we go in and we measure these benchmarks through really clean and accurate bookkeeping, and then we create reporting to say, hey, here is where you're performing well, and here is where you are off target, and here is exactly what we can do to get you there. So the first thing that we like to look at is your revenue mix. We like to have a blend of skincare sales along with treatment sales. Skincare is a really great service line to sell because you can get some pretty good margins on your skincare. So we like to at least see a 90-10 blend there. And then after your revenue, the next thing that we look at is your cost of delivery. And your cost of delivery is exactly what it costs you to perform the treatments that are delivered. So there are two main components of that. There is products and supplies. I've worked with several med spas, and 30% is really the ideal range that we want you in, 25-30%. And when I say products and supplies, I'm talking about all of your aesthetic treatment products. So your Botox, your filler, your laser tips, your microneedling tips, everything, your medical supplies, all of that is included in there, and your skincare retail. If I start to see, as a fractional CFO, if I start to see 35%, 40%, that can indicate a couple of things. That can indicate poor inventory management. So product may be walking out the door. You may have product expiring. You may not be selling what's on your shelves. It can also indicate that you're priced too low. So there's a ton that we can tell when your benchmarks are off. Direct labor, that's your clinicians actually providing services to your patient base. We like to see their compensation, their full compensation package. So their 401k, health benefits, bonuses, everything at 15 to 20% of revenue. If you're trending higher than that, it means you have a comp plan issue or a pricing issue. So after you have paid for your cost of delivery, you've spent like 50% of your revenue. So let's say you made $100,000 that month, 50,000 goes to labor, clinician labor, and your aesthetic treatment product. Then you have 50,000 left over to do everything else in your business. The next area that we like to look at are your operating expenses. So this is like the fixed expenses that you have to pay for the business to run. So that includes your indirect labor. So that's like your admin, your front desk, medical assistants, your rent, your insurance, your professional services and development, and then your software and everything else. So we like to see that about 25 to 30% of revenue. And then your marketing and advertising. I will say most med spas are traditionally underinvested here in marketing and advertising, simply because it's difficult to measure the return on marketing and advertising. But it is something you want to continue to invest in. At least 5 to 7%, because what you invest today in your marketing and advertising is what's going to bring in your patients for tomorrow, whether that's a client referral program, right? If you're primarily word of mouth, that can be a marketing and advertising initiative. And then after that, after you've paid all of those other expenses, the goal is to have a profit margin somewhere around 20 to 25%. So this is kind of the map that can help you see, like, where am I overspending? Where am I underspending? And what does this mean I need to work on in my business in order to get within a healthy range?
Yeah, this is such a helpful visual. And guys, if you haven't already, smash the screenshot button on this one. Definitely do, because I think this is such a helpful kind of back of envelope guide, some things that you can take home tonight and really start to dive into if you haven't before. So yeah, really, really excellent resource here. I am going to do a quick gut check for the audience because we are getting super close to the end and we're going to spend a little bit of time doing Q&A. But I'm curious, for all of the 5 strategies that we covered tonight, whether it was pricing, knowing your numbers, changing up your menu, adjusting comp plans, benchmarking, what's an area that you think you're going to jump in first and make some changes? I'm super curious if anybody's feeling like ready to go and make some adjustments right away. Sell packages, yes, Beth.
Menu.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Precious is going to go home and benchmark, which we love. Memberships, comp redesign, menu, amazing, guys. Okay, super exciting that you all are pumped about what you learned. Amazing. Menu changes, looking into profit margins. Yes, Marina, that's amazing. Awesome. A lot of love for memberships. Okay, heard. I think there's more for us to dive into in a future session. That's really exciting. Well, keep it coming. Feel free to continue dropping some thoughts in the chat. Before we jump into Q&A, I just want to share one last just quick thought around GlossGenius specifically. We are a platform that's really built for aesthetic businesses, growing and scaling and helping you get to your goals. And so with our tools that help, you report, know your real numbers, run memberships and packages, we have a payment system that helps you grow your ticket at every single checkout, a lot of great operational infrastructure in there for your team. We're super proud of the platform. We know that businesses on GlossGenius earn 65% more on average, which we're, again, incredibly proud of. If this is interesting to you and you'd like to see what this could look like for your practice, really recommend scheduling a customized demo with our team. So this is a little QR code that's up on the screen. Gabriella from my team also just dropped a note in the chat. Feel free to schedule some time with our team. They will walk you through everything you need to know. They're product experts who will show you the back end and what it could look like for you specifically. So if you've not done it before, now's your shot. Definitely go ahead and click in or scan. And then I'll also say too, by the way, as we transition to Q&A, connect with Whitney on Instagram, obviously. Whitney, tell us your handle really quickly for the room.
Yes, it's at holistic.money. That's
Yes.
HOLISTIC.money.
Love it. And Whitney has so much knowledge that I'm sure she'd love to continue sharing with you guys. So definitely stay in touch with her. As we are a couple minutes from the end, now's your time. Questions. Any questions specifically for Whitney, for GlossGenius? We're happy to answer them. Chrissy, you jumped in first with a great question. Is there an aesthetic record side to GlossGenius? The answer is yes. So GlossGenius does offer charting. We have photo markup, ND sign off, really great charting features in there, forms and waivers. It's an all-in-one solution for aesthetic businesses. So I would highly recommend taking a dive in if you haven't already. And Chrissy, maybe our team can help you out with the demo too. And then let's see. Lauren, this is maybe an interesting question for you, Indy. Lauren asked, why do you think it's so difficult to find financial professionals that focus on the aesthetics or cosmo industry? Do you have thoughts on that?
I think because it's actually a more complex industry than a lot of people realize. When I first started working with in the aesthetics industry, and what I mean by that is there are a lot of moving parts, and I think you have to really understand the ins and outs of the business to do it well. When I first started, there was a huge learning curve for me, and now we're so intimately familiar with the businesses that we can move a lot faster. But I think it's because it's a complicated industry. But for me, I think that's a great challenge, and I think it also means there's a lot of areas for improvement.
Love that. I think that's part of the joy of being in this industry is there's so many different nooks and crannies and things to get into. And yeah, some would view it as complicated and we just love it. So I think that's such an awesome take there. Okay, Christy asks, how do I get a recording of this? We are going to be sharing a recording probably no later than end of day tomorrow. So watch your inbox and we will send you the recording of our chat so that you can feel free to share it. And then let's see. We had a question in the chat about MD sign-off. And Violet, I wonder, Violet from our team might be able to drop a support article about MD sign-off. So we'll maybe defer to her there really quickly over the next couple of minutes. Probably easier to just share an article for you. But thank you so much for that question, Nari. Okay, let's see. Let's see. A couple more questions. We have a little bit of time. Not really any, but we'll stay a minute or two. Is compensation, okay, this is from Katerina. Is the compensation percentage assuming and including tipping income too? And how does that change for markets and services that traditionally include tipping? I'm curious, Whitney, if you have a take on that.
Yeah, I do. Actually, I'm glad that you're asking this question. So if you were, Katerina, just really quick, if you were not delivering medical aesthetic treatments, meaning anything with a laser or an injectable, if we're talking about like facials or nails, those things don't have as high product costs. So the reason why the labor percentage is so low, and I'm going to get to your tips, but when you brought up tips, it made me realize I needed to make this clarification. The reason the labor percentage at 15 to 20% is so low is because product costs are so high and treatment prices are so high. So if we are looking at services like facials or nails or hair, your labor cost is going to be a much higher percentage. So it's going to be somewhere around 30 to even 40%, maybe even 50% if you don't have high product costs. So your question around tips is traditionally tips in the accounting world go on the balance sheet. I'm not going to get into that, but if you don't have that going on with your accounting, what you do is it's just the tips are included in the revenue, and yes, tips are included in their compensation, and that is included in the percentage there. But remember, if you don't have high treatment product costs, that means you have more room for labor costs. The important part is that your cost of delivery never exceeds 50. So you can kind of back into, okay, if my treatment costs are really low, that means I have more room for labor costs.
Yeah. Hopefully that was helpful, Katerina. It's super interesting. Awesome. Yay. Okay, good. Amazing. Well, I know we had one other quick question from Leslie around example websites. Leslie, I hope you saw Violet dropped some examples of our website themes for you to check out. So if you haven't, feel free to click in. And yeah, we are just about at time here. I'm going to flip back to our last slide really quickly. Again, please follow Whitney. I see some folks in the chat saying that they already are following you or they're about to, which we love. So thanks, guys. That is so awesome. And I hope you guys can all stay in touch. And then, yeah, just as a reminder, we are ready for you to book any demo that you'd like. We'd love to spend some time with you and show you a bit more about the platform and how it works in motion. So if you're curious about GlossGenius, if this piqued your interest, definitely scan the QR code or click the link in the chat that Gabriella just dropped again for you guys to schedule that customized demo with a real person on our team who's going to spend some quality time with you. So please feel free to do that. Elizabeth, Gabriella's way ahead of you. She just dropped Whitney's Instagram again, and that is at holistic.money. So definitely check Whitney out. But I want to thank Whitney so much. Thank you so much for being here. This was awesome. We love this.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, enjoy the rest of your day or your evening, wherever you're located. And thank you so much. We'll see you at the next one. Bye, guys.